In last week's episode, we started talking about how to build a KPI dashboard using Excel. And we started by discussing the flow of data and the design choices. In this episode, I will teach you the Excel functions that go into creating a KPI dashboard. So if you haven't seen last week's episode, I think you should pause this video, go back, watch it, and then come back to this one. And I'm going to repeat it here that the reason why it's crucial for you to get good at creating KPI dashboard is that it helps you stand out from the herd, both at work or during a job interview process, meaning that it's really important for your career advancement. So today's video combined with last week's episode can help you create a KPI dashboard from scratch, but also if you're interested in taking the easy way out, this template here is available for sale on my website, along with video lectures on how to create it, modify it, add new KPIs, and troubleshoot it. In building this KPI dashboard here, I had to use certain Excel functions. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the Excel functions that I use to build the KPI dashboard. And there are four. The first one is index match. Index match is a very easy formula, but a lot of people get tripped up by it and confused by it. So I'm going to tell you how to create the index match formula like a story and how I run it in my head like a story every time I do it. I've been doing it for 10 or 15 years, but every time I run it, I type in an index match formula. I have to tell myself the formula as a story in my head so I don't forget it. Index match is the first one. Second is conditional formatting. Very easy. I'm going to show you how to create conditional formatting to create the color coding for the KPI dashboard. So pink is bad, green is good, pretty easy stuff. And then the drop-down menus, so creating a data validation for the month so that the user can easily click on the menu and select the months that they want. And then building links in the file so that if you have a definition that's too long and you want to just like click a link and go to someplace else in the file where you define the KPI more broadly, that's how you create click on the link. So jumping right in and looking at the file and looking at the index match and how it works in the file. So like we discussed before, this is the dashboard tab here, but the data is coming as the numbers indicate here. So the tabs is the data tab, and then the data flows from data into staging, and then from staging into dashboard. The data tab, like we said, has no formulas. It's just data dump. You're basically copying and pasting your income statement data and your balance sheet data into this tab, right? Then the next step over, which is staging, that's where you want to bring in your data from the data tab using index match, right? So that whenever you are updating your data in the data tab, the data is being updated and grabbed in here in this tab. So the formula that I'm using is index match. And this here, I'm gonna go ahead and delete this formula and go ahead and create it from scratch. So if we wanna bring in the accounts receivable balance with index match, you say equals index. You select index, it opens up. The way that I tell this in my head like a story is that I say index what is my answer? So index your answer. This is always how I tell myself when I'm building an index match. Index my answer. Well, my answer is the accounts receivable balance, right? So index my answer. So I go into the data tab, highlight the column where my data lives, right? So this is the column where it's going to index from. This is my answer. So my answer lies somewhere in this balances, right? So right here, down here, accounts receivable, right? So I'm highlighting the entire column. This is where I want to index. This is my answer. So this is how I tell this to myself in my head. This is my answer. Index my answer, comma, match. Match. Now, match accounts receivable. So we're matching this value, comma, in what? In what values? So you go back into data. This is the column where it has the values. This is the column that it has accounts receivable. So you're matching the value you had in the staging tab, which is accounts receivable, into the values that exist in this column right here, and then you put a comma 0, and so if it's an error it gives you a 0, and then you close with 2 parentheses, enter, right? And now you get the value being pulled here before you go ahead and drag it across, right? So you can easily just go and drag it across, right? But that's going to give you the wrong values in the next columns. You want to go ahead and fix in place with a dollar sign your criteria, right? So the criteria that's looking here is column C, which is this value here. You put in a dollar sign before that, and then you gotta also fix the criteria column where you're looking in the other tab, right? So putting a dollar sign. This dollar sign here means that when you drag this formula across, you're telling the Excel formula not to move this value C here, the column C, right? Not to move to D and E and F. You don't want it to move. You want it to stay in place because this is where the word accounts receivable exists. You want it to stay there. Same thing for B in the data tab. Column B, I'm going to click enter and I'm going to show you column B in the data tab. Right here, this column is where the word accounts receivable exists. This is your table where you're looking the value for your index match. So you wanna put in this $sign that I showed you in the criteria so that you're not changing the criteria if you wanna pull this across like this, right? So now you can pull it across safely and you bring in the value. So this is the index match to bring in the values from the previous tab. And now that I brought in the values for accounts receivable and for revenue, I bring in the same way, an index match formula that does the same thing. And in fact, once you create this index match here, you can basically just drag it down one, right? And it's gonna grab revenue, right? So let me just show you by deleting this entire revenue row here. Let's say it doesn't exist and I wanna pull in revenue. When you highlight this row and you pull it down, right? You are bringing in the revenue because what it's doing is going to do an index match on one row over, which is revenue. So now when you double click it to see what it's bringing in revenue. So it's looking in the word revenue in the same array, which is here in data. I have revenue up here. So it's looking in the same column for the word revenue and it's bringing in the corresponding value, right? So this is how I'm bringing in data. Once I have it here, then it's easy for me to say run a formula for DSO. So DSO, if we look at the formula which I have here in the help tab, days sales outstanding is going to be accounts receivable divided by credit sales times the number of days in the period. So if I go back here to staging, I got the value would be 43 days. And I'll do the same thing for accounts payable to come up with the days payable outstanding. We'll do that for accounts receivable, do an index match to bring in the value, do an index match to bring in my past due accounts receivable. And don't forget that a key thing to happen is that wording has to be the same. So the past due accounts receivable, that word, this expression, has to be the same that is used in the data tab. So past due accounts receivable here is named the same way, right? Guess what happened if I change the wording in one of these steps, right? If I just remove the S, go back to staging, look what happened. It errored out because now it's not finding this exact expression in the data tab. So let me just put the S back, and that's how it's looking up and bringing in the value. So this is how you bring in the values into the staging tab using an index match. And then to bring in the values from staging into dashboard, I also use an index match. So for revenue, to bring in this value of $2.2 million for the month of February, I'm also using an index match. But if you look at this index match formula, it's a little longer because I'm looking up two criteria. I'm looking up the word revenue, this word revenue up here, and I'm looking up the month of February so that I'm bringing in the value for that month, right? So let me delete it and go ahead and recreate it. So the way to recreate this is to say index, and index, like we said, like a story, indexing what? Your answer, right? So what's the answer? The answer lies in staging, right? And the data in staging, and the answer lies in all of these numbers here that are the results of all the calculations. So I'm gonna highlight the entire section of the results of the KPIs, right? And then I'm going to say comma match, select match from here, match what in what. So I'm matching the word revenue, which is the KPI I'm looking for, right? In the array, which is all of the KPIs here, right? So you go down and you make it the same length, the same number of cells that you have at the beginning of the formula so that the array matches. What that means is, like you see, all the way down to C71, and here at the beginning also O71. So it's the same length exactly, right? Otherwise it will give you an error. So you match that comma 0. So if it's error, it gives you a 0, right? And then you say another match. And the second match is the date, because you want the matching of the month you're selecting from the drop-down menu February to match exactly, so that when you select a different month, it will change. So that will be February, looking that up in the values here, and highlight the month on top. That's the array, and then you just close this up and enter. Usually when you do this, it's a long formula. It has a lot of parentheses. Excel will suggest adding another parenthesis. Do you want to accept the correction? Yes. So that's basically how you build it. You build in an index match to bring in the value based on two criteria. One is revenue and one is for the month of the year. The next Excel function I'm using is the conditional formatting, and this is how I'm adding color to the KPI dashboard so that it's pink when it's bad and green when it's good. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you that how I do it right here on the KPI dashboard. If you look at revenue, I have 2.2 million, but it has no color, right? The rest of them have a color to them. So gross margin, green is good. When it's pink, it's bad. But I want to add this conditional formatting to revenue so that when it's equal or greater than the budget, it's green, or if it's less than the budget, it's pink, right? So that's pretty easy. You just highlight it, and then you go up here on top to conditional formatting. You click on that, and then you have highlight cell rules. You have greater than, less than, between, equal to, but the one that I'm looking for is equal to or greater than. That's the one that I like because I want it to be when it's equal to budget or greater, I want it to be green. So I'm gonna click on more rules, and in here I can choose. So if I want it to be greater than, so I want it to be greater than or equal to. So if it's equal to or greater than the budget, it's gonna be green, right? Now, where is the budget? You can basically put your cursor here and then just select this, right? So you select it where your budget is, right? Now, what color do you want it to be, right? So I want it to be green fill, right? So I'm gonna click OK, right? So right now it's not doing anything because right now it's less than the budget, right? So you need to add in the next rule in the conditional formatting that says if it's less than the budget, then make it red, right? So you keep highlighting that cell, right? And then you go to conditional formatting and you can say highlight cell rules. Let's add one more, right? So I'm gonna make it green when it's less than what, right? So here you can highlight again, you can click on where the budget is, and you want it pink. That sounds great. I'm gonna click OK. There you go. So that's how you make a conditional formatting. Now when you change the month from here on top, this is gonna change dynamically, right? It happens to be also pink here because it's less than the budget in August. If I look at July, pink because it's less than the budget. If I look at June, pink. So that's also the way to test it, right? Just select the month and make sure it's doing the right thing. So this is how you add conditional formatting to create the color coding for each of these tiles. Up next is the Excel function I'm using to create a drop-down menu for the user to select the month from, right? So if you look here, I have a menu. When you hover over the month that you want to look at, you can select from it easily instead of having to type in which month you want the values to be returned for, right? So this is data validation. It's pretty easy. So let's go ahead and delete this cell, right? And let's do it from scratch. So I want to add in a data validation. So basically I highlight my cell, I go to data, and I look for data validation, and it's going to be right here, right? Data validation. And you want it to be a list. Right here, there are a bunch of options you can choose from, but I'm going to go with a list because I have a list of months I wanted to look into, right? So here's a list. I'm going to select that, and here is the source, right? So I can delete that. I want to show you how I got that. So I just put my cell in the source and highlight the source for it, basically. Just right here, and then click OK. And that's basically going to add my data validation here. I can then select the months, right? So that's adding a very easy way. Instead of having the user type in the month, they can just select from a drop-down menu. I'm also using the hyperlink function in Excel, which is a way for me to link one cell to another tab in the file. So that, for example, if you have a definition of a KPI that's too long to explain in 2 or 3 words, and basically you want to have it defined in another place in the file, and the user to click on the hyperlink and takes them to that that definition is, this is what I use here for links. So for example, if you look here, I have some links. For example, DSO, or Day Sales Outstanding, I have a link that says read more. So basically when I click on it, it's going to take me to another tab where I have, it's called help, and that's where I explain DSO, what it is as a definition, the number of days it takes to convert sales into cash, and the formula right here, and how to interpret and how to improve it, right? So this is a good way for the reader if they want to learn more about Day Sales Outstanding. If you're sending this to your CEO, your CFO, they can click on this and read more about it. So the way to do it is if you want to create a link, and let's do it maybe here for customer acquisition costs, right? Is to basically just write some text that says, more, or read more, right? And then I can hyperlink this word read more to somewhere where I define customer acquisition costs. So I'm going to go ahead and create in the help tab, I'm going to create a section here for customer acquisition costs, right? And I'm going to say the purpose. What does it measure? So this is the average cost to acquire. I don't know how to type acquire a customer. Okay, if I misspelled this, my bad, but this is not a spelling exam. This is more of a finance thing. So sales and marketing costs divided by the number of new customers. And now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to link this here, what I said, read more in customer acquisition costs. So I'm going to right click it and just say hyperlink. And hyperlink, I can use a web page, this document, or email address. So basically I'm going to say this document. It's going to say, okay, you have a few tabs here. Which tab do you want? I'm going to say help, right? And it's going to say which cell in help. Basically, you can just choose any cell for now and then go look what cell that was and come back and type it in here. So I'm just going to say, D5 for now and click OK. So it has a hyperlink and the color changed here. I'm not sure why. So I'm just going to do a formatting for it. So now when I click on it, it's going to take me to help, but it's going to take me somewhere random here in D4, right? But you don't want it to go to D or D5. You want it to go to this cell here, which is what? If I look up in the cell bar up here is B12, right? So I can just easily go back and go back to that cell, right click it. It says here either edit hyperlink or remove it. I'm going to just click edit. I'm going to say B12. And click OK. And again, every time you do this, it's going to change the color of the hyperlink. You can just format that again. I'm just going to make it like yellowish and increase the font so you can read it. And that's it. I can click on it and it's going to take me to where the customer acquisition cost is defined and the formula for it and all that stuff. So this is how you use the hyperlink function so that you can link places in the file to where the definition or more wording or context on whatever KPI you have. And that's it for this video. This is how I create a KPI dashboard to run the entire business from a financial perspective, and I'll see you in the next video.